Hello everybody and welcome to Cabaret Secrets. My name's Gary Williams and today I'm very excited to have with me a multi-platinum selling 5-time Grammy-nominated recording artist and probably the world's greatest ambassador for the great American songbook, Michael Feinstein. Welcome to Cabaret Secrets.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've just got in from Los Angeles, I think. You're here in London for the London Festival of Cabaret. You've got a show in about a week's time. What can we expect?
Lots of good music. The show will be with a 5-piece band. I was going back and forth about what size group I wanted to have, but I thought it'd be fun to work with a combo, even though it is a large theater, the Palace. It'll be a mixture of certainly things people, I imagine, would like to hear me sing. Gershwin, and I'll probably do I Won't Send Roses, because David Jacobs, the recently departed famous DJ here in London, used to play that, my recording of it from time to time. Sometimes I take requests from the audience.
While during the show?
Yes. It's interactive.
It keeps the band on their toes, eh?
I usually do it solo, but sometimes...
Make them do it.
Well, unfortunately, it may not be good for me if they can't always keep up, or they don't know the song very well. It can be a train wreck.
I read a while ago that Kira Takanawa has it in her contract, I don't know if it's true or not, you probably know, but she has it in her contract that she needs a day off before a concert for each hour time difference there is. So if she's coming from New York to London, she needs 5 days off to get accustomed to the new time before she feels her voice is going to be at its best. But you're a pretty resilient traveller, I think.
I am, even though I do have in my contract that if I hear a Kira Takanawa record, I have to have a week off.
She says the same. I know, I don't know. She does. I'm so glad I've got you here. There is a question I've wanted to ask you for 5 years.
Oh, dear.
This is true. And there's something I tell my friends about. I tell my friends this anecdote about you. And now you're here sitting with me, and I'm going to get the answer. 5 years ago, 2008, you were in London. I think it was your Feinstein's at the Shore season.
Oh, yes.
And you were performing your Sinatra Project, your sort of tribute, your nod to Frank Sinatra. And during that show, you performed For Once in My Life. It was a similar, you're looking at me blank, but am I on the right? Do you remember this?
Yes.
Was this you?
The broad strokes, yes.
So, For Once in My Life.
Right.
Broadly, it sounded to me similar to the famous arrangement that Sinatra used, except at the end, just before the last note, you sort of, for once in my life, I have someone who needs... And then you sort of widened your stance a bit, you sort of bent over a bit, you took this breath, you braced yourself, you sort of put your back into this colossal last note. It was a long, big note, and it went on and on and on, and the band's playing round and you're holding the note much longer than anybody thought that you could. And the audience were really aghast at this, and you got a huge applause. And I sat there and thought, that's easy for him. He's made that look harder than it is for dramatic effect. There is a school of thought that, people want to see, they say, well, we want to see you sweating, we want to see you working for your money, we want to, the audience want to feel as though, is he going to make it? And you just get there and wow, it's more exciting and adds a bit of, thrill to the performance. Is that something you're conscious of?
I am conscious of it, and the reason I'm conscious of it is because of Liza Minelli, with whom I spoke about this very thing. Because when she performs, she does certain things, certain movements and motions that I'm actually talking about two different things, but she does do things that make it look difficult, where she'll like breathe and pull herself together, and or she'll do things. Well, it's like Judy Garland. Judy Garland used to put things in her show where she would mess up, You Go to My Head. She always would sing, I forgot the gall-darn words. She sang that over and over again. Now, why she did that, I do not know. But she literally did that in almost every show for a season anyway.
And she was a savvy performer. She knew what she was doing,
yeah,
right?
so that was a conceit. But Liza told me she was watching Lena Horne, and Lena was doing some number where she was gritting her teeth and putting her, and at one point, Lena took her fist and beat her chest when she did a number, and Liza said, I was so impressed by that movement. She said, I did it on stage, and she said, I knocked the wind out of myself because Lena was miming it. I mean, she hit her chest, but she didn't hit it hard, made it look like she banged her. And Liza said she literally knocked the wind out of herself. And so there is absolutely a technique to making the audience see that it's difficult, making them
think that it's difficult.
Think that it is. And just as the great pianist Moritz Rosenthal was asked to give suggestions to up-and-coming concert pianists, and he said, always make faces when you play difficult passages.
That's the secret.
It is letting the audience know that you're working hard.
Because for what we do, and I mean, I don't know if you find the term offensive, but crooning, you know, I mean, I sing, I sing softly. I'm not a big belter. I like to sing nice, gentle songs, and it's quite soporific. I sometimes have in my rider that people are required to gently wake the audience up at the end of the show, because if I've done a good job, everyone's nice and relaxed, you know. But sometimes, you know, we do need to try and add a little bit of pizzazz in there. So you think these techniques are important?
I do. It is show business. There are many people who have tremendous talent as performers, but as singers, I mean, as musicians, but don't have the talent as performers. And you know, and I know, that it takes years of experience. And when young people ask me for advice, the first thing I always say is find a place to perform and do it over and over and over again. Be in front of an audience. Because the longer they're at school or in university, it's avoiding what they really need to.
The point?
Yes.
Yeah. Janet Leigh, I think it was Janet Leigh that said something along the lines, after Sinatra, anybody that was singing those kind of songs, standards, if they sounded like him, everyone would just say they were copying him. But if they didn't sound like him, they sounded like they were doing it wrong. So we're in a bit of a tricky situation, I think, we singers of the Great American Song, particularly if we're singing Sinatra songs that Sinatra made famous. And from what I can gather, what I know about your career, it seems that until a Sinatra Project, you'd sort of steered a little bit clear of direct associations with Sinatra. Is that something that you were aware of, sort of comparisons and trying to carve out your own sound for this very, very familiar repertoire?
I was not greatly influenced by Sinatra in my formative singing years, because I was listening to everybody, and I considered Sinatra one of many, especially because I was listening to a lot of early recordings of these American popular songs, because I wanted to hear the original versions of them. And from there I could learn not only how they originally sounded, but how they evolved, which was important for me, because it's a whole lineage. If you take a song like All of Me or Someone to Watch Over Me, songs that literally have changed from each decade to a little bit faster, phrasing, different notes. It's like All of Me is you. It was originally All of Me. It was written for Belle Baker. Belle Baker was a woman who always cried when she performed. She was famous for bursting into tears. So you took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? It was written for her. Matter of fact, the joke is that Belle Baker would cry when she sang anything. She'd sing, "Oh boy, I'm lucky. I'll say I'm lucky. This is my lucky day." That was the joke around Tin Pan Alley.
Right.
And but All of Me, the original is, "You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of..." I've not heard anyone sing that note. Why not? I've not heard anyone sing that note.
Because most people can't.
In 40... Well, they don't know it, because it's why not take all of... That's not the chord in the music. But it's not done that way
But the original is much more interesting.
Yes.
It sounds like an Alec Wilder kind of note.
Yeah, so things like that are important to me. Now, Sinatra, of course, with Nelson Riddle, reinvented the way the songs are heard, but I don't agree that he was... I don't agree with what Janet Leigh said, in the sense that at the same time as Sinatra, he was mighty, but there was also Dean Martin, and there was Sammy Davis Jr., and there was still Dick Haymes, and then there was Jack Jones. I mean, there's so many other singers, and they're all obscure, they're all forgotten. There were singers who had major careers at different times, and those who made their mark, like Bob Manning or Buddy Clark, who died in 1949 in a plane crash, but they all were significant. And I think it's a shame that it has been winnowed down to just Sinatra.
Why do you think that is? People like to just have one hero, a poster boy?
It's the enormity of his career, because he was a television star, a film star, radio, all of it. I mean, he was ubiquitous, and also all of the movies. It made him an international celebrity. His personal life was sensation, all of that stuff.
Do you think he was as good a singer as everybody seems to say he is?
Yes, I do. However, I so hate what he sometimes would do with lyrics, especially if he's supposed to be the greatest singer of the 20th century. To me, the greatest singer of the 20th century doesn't screw around with the lyrics the way he did. And people say, oh, well, he did that later. No, he didn't. He did it more later. But he did it when he was younger, too.
Isn't there a story about Cole Porter walking out of a party because he didn't like the way Sinatra sang I Get a Kick Out of You?
I don't know of him walking out of a party, because Porter was a very polite man. However, I was told, I think by Larry Adler and somebody else, that Porter literally sent him a telegram at one point, so exasperating, saying, if you can't sing the song the way I wrote it, please don't sing it. On the other hand, he loved the way Frank sang the songs in High Society, and he wrote them for Frank. And Johnny Green, who wrote Body and Soul and I Cover the Waterfront, and was the musical director of High Society and other films in which he worked with Sinatra, he was excoriating the way Sinatra screwed up lyrics of songs. And I said, so you don't like him? He said, no, I love him.
Made him a lot of money, I should think, as well.
Yes. So I think that's the one flaw in an otherwise perfection. And I was talking to Quincy Jones about it one night, and Quincy got so angry at me, and he said, well, it's a shame that Frank wasn't around for you to tell him how to sing his songs, isn't it? I said...
I love that he said that to you, though.
And I said...
And you said...
I said, remember, I said, we're starting from the place that I consider him to be one of, if not the greatest singer of the 20th century. I said, however, it bothered Ira Gershwin that he changed I Viewed the Morning with Alarm to I Viewed the Morning with Much Alarm, or with Such Alarm, because that's not what the lyrics said. I viewed the morning with alarm. The British Museum had lost its charm. It wasn't, I viewed the morning with much alarm. That's a different sentiment, a different feeling, and a different emotion. But even that is forgivable compared to some of the other changes.
Do you know if the writers of these songs also minded the way, how dramatically the arrangements changed as well? Because originally, I think that the songs were quite straight, weren't they? Almost square, the way that they were written, as opposed to the more later swagger and the swing that arrangers like Nelson Riddle put into them, which gave them quite a different feel. How did the writers feel about that, the work that the arrangers were doing?
Most of the writers loved what the arrangers did because it made their songs fresh. It kept them alive. It made them new. There were exceptions. Richard Rodgers hated people to screw around with his songs. He hated Mel Torme's hit record of Blue Moon. He hated Peggy Lee's recording of Lover because it was a 3/4. Lover, when I'm near you and I hear you speak. And Peggy did this driving arrangement with Gordon Jenkins. Lover, when I'm near you and Well, he sees Peggy Lee at a party. She says, hi, Dick. He just looks at her and says, it's a waltz, and he walks away. So he was tough.
But when you did your Sinatra Project, the arrangements sounded broadly familiar to what we might expect. It didn't seem that you've given completely different treatments. It must have been a challenge to do that, get that balance of bringing something new and fresh and not having obvious comparisons.
Yes, it was a balancing act, because when I first approached the idea of saluting Sinatra, I thought, what can I possibly bring to this man's canon? Why even do it?
Because you've got to do something new, right? Otherwise, what's the point?
Yes, it's true. And what I did was add a verse or a second chorus, or, for example, The Lady is a Tramp. When he did The Lady is a Tramp, he did the same chorus, repeated it. She gets too hungry for dinner. I did the second chorus, I did a key change, and then I did part of the third chorus. So I turned it into a whole...
More of an Ella Fitzgerald sort of thing.
Yeah, I took it further and did other lyrics, and I often wonder why he didn't sing other lyrics.
Couldn't be bothered to learn them.
Well, I wish I had asked him, because something that never occurred to me at the time to even ask him about. And it's,
so you met him?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And how was he the man that people? Well, there are many different Sinatras, aren't there, depending on who you ask. But how was he with you?
Well, he was great because it was at his house, and he was relaxed, and he was happy, and I just wanted to know about music. I didn't even care about the other stuff. I didn't even know a lot of things that I've heard since. I just was talking about the music, and he loved songwriters and arrangers, and to talk about Skip Martin or to talk about Conrad Salinger. Who else even would talk about these people? And he had Bill Miller playing cocktail piano at the house, and he was. And there's Bill Miller, playing Emily and playing all the gorgeous chords. I mean, it was heaven.
That's nice. That's a nice party.
Yeah, what a swell party it was.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you balance the need to be commercial with your own desire to, as an artist, to break new ground and realize the things which are going on in your head all the time? No doubt, different ideas and creative things, because at the end of the day, we all have to have half an eye on commerciality as well.
It's interesting because I've made a lot of choices that are not commercial. My whole career is not commercial, and that when I started singing old songs, I was fired from piano bars because they wanted the contemporary hits and I wouldn't do them. So that's how I started.
But that's pretty brave, because most people, would think, well, I want to keep the job, I want the money, okay, I'll do the stuff they don't want, they want me to do, so I can maybe throw in a few things I want to do, I'll get a balance. But you were pretty adamant about that.
I would have been fired faster if they heard my renditions of the contemporary songs. So I started out from that place, and through the years I've been asked to do certain kinds of things or certain songs. Like, oh no, I can't sing that because I don't like the rhymes in it, or I don't like this or I don't like that. And so I made a choice to do certain things that have limited my audience. It's like Oscar Levant said, my appeal is to a select few and they're in danger of being institutionalized or something like that. And so I have made that choice, even though I have broadened to a certain degree, and certainly one of the things I love doing is writing, and I've been writing more.
Music or lyrics or both? Mainly
music. I've done a few lyrical things, but mainly music. And that's fun. It's incredibly challenging, and I avoided it for decades off and on because of the ghosts of all the greats who always did it better.
Again, the comparisons are always around the corner, aren't they?
Yes, but they were all at one time or another having their own doubts and going through plagiarism suits and such. Harry Warren was sued for plagiarism when he wrote Lullaby of Broadway. And he went to Jerome Kern, who was a good friend of his, and he said, Jerry, they're suing me for Lullaby of Broadway. And Kern said, well, play it. So Harry plays, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Kern says, that's enough. He goes to his filing cabinet of all, he pulls the book, rifles through, finds an ancient song that he had written decades before, and hands it to Harry and says, here's your Lullaby of Broadway. In other words, he gave him a song that had the same melodic idea that had been written, and the suit was was dismissed.
You're comparing, everybody's comparing your work, new work, against the best of the best, the cream of the cream that sort of lasted decades. And you're not working with these people at the time where you could write, 20 duffers and get one hit and nobody would worry about the duffers. It's hard, isn't it?
It's a very different time, it's true. And the times have changed to the degree that it's not possible for many songs to become hits in the way they could previously. During the time I knew and worked with Ira Gershwin, he had this whole trunk of unpublished Gershwin songs. And he recognized that if They Can't Take That Away From Me had been introduced in 1977, it wouldn't have gotten any attention. Because no matter how great the song is, it's a different time. It's not sung by Fred Astaire. It doesn't have the same chances. So there's that to begin with. And I remember Marvin Hamlisch talking about how even when he started writing musical theater songs in the 60s, he already knew that it was over for Broadway as far as hit songs coming from musical theater. So it changed a long time ago. And so there are not many reasons to try and write, quote, a hit song or a song in that sense. One has to simply write for other reasons. And so when I write something, it's because I have the motivation to express something. I recently worked on a musical review called Stars of David, which is about the Jewish experience based on a book that has a score the producer requested many people write scores. Duncan Sheik, who wrote Spring Awakening, wrote a song. Marilyn Allen Bergman, Scott Whitman and Mark Shaman wrote something. Janine Tesori, who wrote Thoroughly Modern Millie. All these contemporary, Amanda Green, all great contemporary Broadway writers and beyond contributed.
And you?
And I contributed a song with Lisa Lambert, who won a Tony for her lyrics for The Drowsy Chaperone. And that was a great assignment because it was something that I enjoyed, and it was a fun point of view.
Mm. You mentioned Broadway and Broadway musicals. It's impossible to talk about the Great American Songbook without referring to Broadway, but there's also a big crossover with the jazz world. What kind of people, what kind of performers do you think make better interpreters of the Great American Songbook? People from a jazz background or a musical theatre background?
It's hard to say because, to me, it's a hybrid of both, because my favorite singers were pop singers like Rosemary Clooney or Buddy Clark, even though I do love the jazz interpretations of so many people, from Sarah Vaughan to Ethel Waters to you name it. Broadway performers are so accustomed to singing songs, pardon the expression, straight, mm-hmm. and they don't always understand about phrasing and freedom. When I was recording a new song written by the Bergmans, Alan and Marilyn Bergman were present, and I was doing it as they had written it, the musical values of the notes. And Alan said, "Michael," I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "You're singing it too straight." I said, "Oh, well, it's the first recording. I thought you wanted it that way." He said, "No, take it." So I immediately took liberties, because I remember Julie Stein, how told me he was so upset because Streisand's first recording of People, the pop recording, she sang, "People, people who need people." That's not in the music. And he said, "Now everyone's going to sing it that way," and everybody did, and it just bothered him because that became the standard of interpretation instead of letting people make their own choices. Yeah. But getting back to your question, sorry about that.
I love the name dropping. It's great. I get excited every time you drop a name.
Well, okay.
Keep doing it. So, what do jazz performers bring to a song that perhaps musical theatre people don't?
Jazz performers bring a fluidity, a fearlessness, if they're good, even if they're bad, I guess. There's fearlessly bad performers. but to have the ability, they've learned a certain way to sort of take a flight of fancy musically and find their way and discover incredible new things about the songs that can be wonderful. Who
would you rather sing your own material?
I suppose, someone like Brian Stokes Mitchell, who is a great Broadway performer who also has a pop sensibility. But people like him are few and far between. Christine Ebersol is someone who could do that. And there are other great Broadway performers who, to me, are very stilted outside of that. And I won't drop names, but I'll give you initials if you want.
Yeah, go on, do. No, do it afterwards. You are an openly gay singer, an openly gay performer. Your husband, Terence, is never far away, as an integral part of what you do. Did you ever encounter any difficulties, any prejudice when did you make a conscious decision to come out, or were you just always, that's just the way it was?
Luckily, I never was, well, I was going to say I was never in the closet. I was certainly guarded, but when I moved to California at the age of 20, I was not secret about anything. The Gershwins and everybody, they knew who I was, and there was never any secret about that. Even though I didn't talk about it. Then Lee Gershwin, Ira's wife, said, "Oh, come on, just say that you're gay." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'm gay."
Now we can move on.
Right. But I remember that there was an article in The Advocate, an American magazine for alternate, what do you call alternate lifestyles?
Alternate lifestyle. I hate that, alternate lifestyles.
Alternate lifestyles.
Yes.
Well, I had breakfast and lunch and dinner. Is that alternative? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not alternative for me.
Right. But when that magazine came out, it got a lot of coverage, and I actually lost a couple of gigs at that time from some organizations. One was actually a Jewish organization in Florida that canceled the gig, but it didn't last very long. And
do you think it matters these days?
I I don't think so, but I live in a bubble.
Yeah.
You know, it matters to a lot of people, and
you can understand why other well-known entertainers, movie actors, might choose to keep it to themselves.
That's true. The thing that makes me angry is someone like Kevin Spacey, who in print for quite some time denied that he was gay and said, "How dare you call me gay?" I mean, this is all a matter of record. And now says, well, you know, I live my life freely, and now he's basically said he's gay without saying he's gay because he's at the point where he doesn't have to worry about it. But I was so irritated that he specifically denied that he was gay instead of not saying anything.
Is it something you ever mention from
to him?
No. You probably would if you saw it.
When I met him, I didn't. You know, it's the kind of thing. I'm going to know. I didn't say anything because
I'm going to tell him. When I see, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Hello,
well, it didn't
Kevin.
come up in conversation, but I think about it every time I see him. I think what a dishonest thing he did, and what a disservice he did.
He must feel more relieved himself that he just hasn't got a secret to keep. Must be exhausting.
Yes, I know a number of people who do keep up the pose because they're another generation, and I know, certainly in the case of one person, that he absolutely is not happy about it on one level, but cannot bring himself to change.
Do you ever mention it from the stage? I mean, I never used to at all in my performances. It wasn't that I was, embarrassed about it or found it difficult to talk about, but I just thought it was sort of irrelevant. Like I wouldn't talk about politics from the stage. I personally don't feel that's my place when I'm performing. People have come to see me do a show. I don't think that's the right forum to, bang the drum for whatever I might be, into, other than the music and the story that the show's about relating. But occasionally now, I'll refer to it maybe in a jokey way when I'm talking about my past. I'm talking about me growing up and things. And I'm aware that it lets people in. It's sort of a little private, little confession to the audience. There are certain places I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it on a cruise ship where people might be a little bit shocked, particularly certain types of cruise ships, But if I'm doing a London cabaret room, for example, where I would feel that the audience is going to be more relaxed about that, then I would. Do you have a policy of not really talking about it while you're performing?
When I'm performing, whatever I say. I mean, it's not censored. I mean, things just happen. When I was in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio,
right in the middle of America.
Yes,
the famously welcoming, accepting, liberal part of the world.
Yes, Columbus, Ohio was the place where the evangelist Billy Graham said that AIDS was God's punishment of gays. But I was performing, and someone yelled, "Go Bucks!" Go Buckeyes. And I just looked at the guy and I said, does it look to you like I care about sports? I'll do it for humorous effect. Years ago, I was performing with Rosemary Clooney in Los Angeles at the Greek Theater. This would have been the mid-'90s. And somebody yelled out, "You go, girl!" And I said, "Rosemary, do you think they're talking to you or me?" So that's what happened the other night. I was doing a show. I do a series of shows at Sankhill Hall, and I was doing a tribute called "The Leading Men of Broadway" with different guests who were currently leading men on Broadway. And I said, well, you may ask what I have to do with leading men on Broadway. And it just slipped out. I said, well, I dated two of them. And I had no intent.
You knew
but
them intimately.
It is just sort of, so in that sense, I don't.
That must have been a great response.
Oh, well, yeah, it was sort of pandemonium. But so in that sense, I don't hide it. But if I say something, it's usually for comedic effect.
Yeah, exactly, me too. But I'm interested that you say, what comes out of me comes out. It's uncensored, because when I prepare my shows, I very carefully will script my chat. I'll think about what I'm going to say, how that I want the links to be, what I want to say, if it's funny or straight stuff. I'll work on it so much that it sounds very natural and does not sound like a script. Do you work in a similar way with the chat? Because the patter is a really key part of what we do, isn't it?
I've learned just to steal your patter because it's...
I've done the same to you. We're nicking each other.
Well, that's the story about the two film composers, Max Steiner and Eric Wolfgang Korngold. Max Steiner goes up to Korngold and says, "Eric, why is it that as time progresses, my music's getting better and better and yours is getting worse?" And Korngold says, "That's because I've been stealing from you and you've been stealing from me." But in response to your question,
Yes.
I don't deeply prepare what I'm going to say. I have a general sense of what I'm going to talk about. And
Sort of have bullet points.
yes, sometimes
You know where you're going.
Sometimes I don't even know where I'm going. It's true. I sometimes leave things because I trust that I'll be able to do it, and sometimes the adrenaline, I'll come up with something, because if I try and think of something, I can't. I feel like the dumbest person off stage. A friend whom I've known for years says, you're a much more interesting person on stage. And I understand that, because I am. But with preparation, for me, it's odd in that I would tell everybody else to prepare, but I don't deeply prepare. But I have found that, of course, doing the same songs multiple times, something will evolve. So I will have things that will be essentially the same, but they do morph. And if I haven't done a song for a long time, the setup may be completely different, because I just won't remember what I said before.
I think you can get away with doing that because you have a scholarly, an encyclopedic knowledge of what you're doing. That is, this is who you are. It is your life. Much more so than me, for example. I don't have that kind of knowledge. I have to research it. I have to look it up. I think, when was this song written? Or what album was this from again? Or
Right.
give me a bit of background on Oscar Levant or somebody. And I'll read up on it and think, okay, and I'll make this good. But you could probably talk for half an hour about any of the great writers and composers and performers, and you have that facility. But for the rest of us mortals, probably a bit more preparation is important.
It's true. I have the ability to draw on, if you will, a storehouse of information. And that's because I was always obsessed with or interested in the marginalia about the songs and the songwriters from the time that I was very young, and then got to meet many of them. And if I would hear an anecdote, I tried to remember it, even though I didn't write things down, and I'm starting to write things down now. And so in that sense, I do have that cushion.
You've spent a lot of time in the recording studio. Is it something like 30, nearly 40, 30-something? How many albums have you recorded? Have you lost count?
Probably around 30, including certain special collections that were done for various projects.
Been nominated for 5 Grammys.
Yes, I'm a 5-time Grammy loser.
That's one way of putting it. I like that. One of your albums, you worked with the great George Shearing. What was that like?
George Shearing.
Can you see the envy in my eyes?
Oh, he was the sweetest man. He was such a darling person, and I was lucky to know him socially for years before we made an album together, and it was fun. When I worked with George, he was already starting to fail a little bit with his memory. It didn't affect how he played in the studio, but he couldn't remember things. And because one of his first big hit records at the start of his career in the 40s was a beautiful swing, gentle swing version of September in the Rain with this very famous Shearing close style,
the vibes,
close chords or whatever you call it.
Nice, yeah.
He created a new sound. I said, George, let's do September in the Rain. I said, let's do it as a ballad, and let's do the verse. And he said, I don't know the verse. I said, oh, well, I'll teach it to you. And I was so worried that he wouldn't remember the verse because his short-term memory was not very good. Yeah. And we got into the studio, and he remembered it, and he played it so beautifully. And
you must have wept.
I did.
What a wonderful moment.
I literally cried when we did that, and that is my favorite. That is my favorite track of all the things I did with him, because it's what he played is just so heartfelt, and I loved him, and I loved Harry Warren, who wrote the music. Harry was one of my favorite people, and I was thinking of him, so I was thinking how lucky I am to do that.
You must have learned such a lot from these great people that you've worked with or spoken to. What about Barbara Cook, another great friend of yours?
Barbara is so funny because she has a very healthy ego. And then
that's very nicely put.
And then
people tell me I have one of those.
Well, you have to.
Yes,
I think I do too.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I know I do. Barbara also can be very self-deprecating, and
that's just a ruse. We all do that, just so we can hide our egos behind the self-deprecation.
Well, I maybe so, but the thing about Barbara is that she rehearses and rehearses and rehearses, and we've done a number of shows together. Putting shows together with her, it drove me out of my mind because...
Oh, she wanted to rehearse with you, with everybody?
Right, over and over and over.
Was she always like that, or was that something that developed as she got older and perhaps a little less secure? Or?
She's always been like that, and that's why she is who she is.
So good as well, right? Maybe we should all rehearse a bit more.
Probably so. I mean, like Elaine Stritch, when I worked with Elaine Stritch, that was...
A trip.
Well, it's because I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that Elaine would spend an hour and a half on singing a single line of a song.
Wasn't that because she'd be shouting at the stage manager in between each breath? I also saw her at the Shore do the, Liberty.
Yeah, Liberty yes.
show. One of the best things I ever saw. But a friend of mine was employed as her assistant for the week, and I knew a few of the people in the band, and they said, oh, God, when she wasn't on stage, she was all over the place. She was kind of wild, crazy, and the rehearsals went on for hours and very little got done, and she's screaming at the person because they've not put her props in the right place, and this is great. And I thought... Or because they put
them in the right place.
Right, yeah.
That's what they're supposed to be. I know that. Why you got that?
Are you like that?
No.
Never?
No.
Never?
I used to be.
Oh, did you? Oh, good.
No, seriously. No, seriously, I used to be, I think, pretty difficult. Not by design, but because I was so scared, I guess. Because I was performing, I was playing piano bars, and then... right out of the Algonquin, I was playing the Hollywood Bowl, which was 17,000 people. I mean,
wow.
Suddenly,
yeah.
and I was...
You're allowed to go a bit crazy.
I didn't really handle it very well because my life had changed very, very quickly. But I'm not now. I'm pretty relaxed. Once in a while, I'll become difficult. That's if I'm in a circumstance that's very uncomfortable. But it's...
When people are like that, if you're working with, if you observe that or you hear about that kind of behaviour, this sort of diva-ish behaviour, which seems to be quite rare these days, certainly around the people that I know anyway, is it just? Do you think it's just down to nerves and insecurity?
It's definitely insecurity. Eartha Kitt. I had never met Eartha. I did a television show, and she was a guest on the show. And when I met her, she was so standoffish and curt and nasty. And then we rehearsed the song I was going to be playing for her, which was My Funny Valentine. And after we rehearsed it, she completely changed. Oh, darling, it's wonderful. And then she was a different person after that. And a friend of mine who had worked with her had put together a program. It was a benefit where many people were on the bill, and she was so angry at him in the wings for this material he had created for her. She was sure it was going to bomb, and she hit him so hard that he had a bruise and was screaming at him. And then she went on stage, and of course was spectacular, and people were screaming and yelling. And she came up. She said, "Oh, darling, thank you. It was marvelous." And she hugged him and kissed him, and he wanted to have her arrested for battery.
Get off me.
And Elaine is the same way. Elaine. When I did a Carnegie Hall show, the first time I worked with Elaine.
Stritch, not Page.
Right, Elaine Stritch. And Elaine, we did we put together a medley, and she was impossible. I mean, and I love her, and I can say this in front of her, I mean, she was just impossible. And then afterwards, she was so relaxed and so funny, and then she calls me about 1 a.m. because she knows I stay up late, and she says, "Oh, I had a great time." And she said, "I loved meeting your father. He's such an attractive man." I said, "Well, thank you. He loved meeting you." And I said, "My mother was sorry that she didn't get to meet you." And there was a pause, and she said, "Damn, I was hoping she was dead."
That's funny. I remember seeing Liza at the Albert Hall, one and only time I've seen her perform. And the night that I saw her, at least, she was sensational. Really, it was breathtaking, the performance. And again, it was this kind of energy that we're talking about. I'm pretty much like I am off stage as I am on. Do you think that's always the case, that on stage we're just amplified versions of ourselves?
I think there are aspects of ourselves that are on stage. I think that it has to be a part of us, definitely. In the case of Liza, she is somebody who is a very nice person, and she works very, very hard and is very, very prepared. I mean, she is another person who would rehearse and rehearse and work and work and work, and incredibly facile. When she learned the Aznavour song about the person who has a lover who is deaf,
Yeah.
and then she would do the sign language at the end of the song. Liza would do sign language. She had 1 hour with a person who showed her the sign language, and she learned it because and because I went over. She said, "Oh, I learned." And she showed it to me. I couldn't have done that in a million years.
Of course, she could have done it wrong unless you know sign.
That's true. But she works very, very hard and was raised with the work ethic because of her father, a great film director, and her mother. Because of that, she has a certain discipline. Now, there are other parts of Liza's life that can be very disorganized, but as a performer, she has always been impeccable. And the only time I've seen Liza be difficult is when something isn't right, when she needs it a certain way and it isn't right. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago. I was playing in Florida, and I was working with a pianist with whom I'd never worked before, somebody I'd heard play for other performers and I thought was spectacular. This man's a great Broadway talent who plays piano on Broadway shows and a very accomplished musician. He was terrible, and it was a nightmare because his time, he couldn't keep in time with the bass and drums. And
I think I've worked with this guy.
Well, it was pretty tough. And what I did was continually simplify through a rehearsal. Well, let's just play block chords, just play time. I did what I could to make it as good as it could be and to take things away. And he said, "Oh, but the other guy did." I said, "Well, you know, it really feels a little different to me tonight and everything." And later the rhythm players came and said the patience that I exhibited was extraordinary because it was something that they have rarely seen, that I was patient. And they said, "Well, why didn't you fire him?" I said, "Because there was nobody else." And he absolutely played better in performance. You know, he rose to his strengths. And it's still, parts of it I thought were awful, that I was trying to just stay on the song without going to Cleveland.
But when people hire you to perform, they have high expectations, as well they should. Presumably they're paying you a good fee, they're all excited about it, people are paying a lot of money and giving up an evening to come and see you perform, and you obviously have a big responsibility to deliver, to give them, you know, to meet, or at least meet, or hopefully exceed their expectations. And so it's important that you have to, it's your responsibility to take away as many of the variables as possible. You must want to travel with your own sound lighting person. You want to make sure that you can't leave anything to chance, because if you go along and somebody lets you down and it doesn't look or sound right, people are just going to blame you because you're the guy at the front, right?
It's true. It's absolutely true. Reminds me of another story.
Tell me.
Irving Caesar, who wrote the lyrics to Swanee in Tea for Two, lived to be 102 years old. And in the 40s, he wrote a show called My Dear Public, which was a legendary failure because he wanted it to be his epic, greatest creation, and it had a plot that had songs about tolerance and blacks and whites coming together harmoniously, and a noble effort. But the show was a train wreck. And it was directed by Irving Caesar. He co-produced it. He wrote the music. He wrote the lyrics. He wrote the book. So his name was on the title page half a dozen times. And the reviews came out and said, "Caesar should have done this, Caesar should have done that." And Irving said, "Why is everybody blaming me?"
There are so many more questions I had to ask you, but we've run out of time. Thank you for talking to us today, and have a great concert.
Thank you very much, Gary. It's a pleasure to have this time with you.
Thank you for listening to this Cabaret Secrets podcast. If you've got any comments or questions, please visit cabaretsecrets.com, where you'll also find details of the Cabaret Secrets book, an indispensable guide on how to create your own show, travel the world, and get paid to do what you love.